Alright, today we're braving this heat and we're filming multiple videos, hopefully. Alright, today we're going to be talking about my June wrap-up. I read 5 things in June. Let's talk about them. So the first book I read this past month was Neverworld 𝐜𝐭 by Marisha Pessl. This is a YA mystery thriller, and it wasn't great. It wasn't great. Unfortunately, I did not enjoy it. Let me tell you what this is about. So, essentially, we're following a group of kids who used to be very close in high school, and they're all now college freshmen. But basically, when they were still in high school, this guy called 𝐜𝐭, who was also their friend, he died tragically. But it wasn't ever very clear what actually happened the night he passed away, and so they kind of also lost contact after that tragedy. And now in the present, we're following 𝐜𝐿's girlfriend. I think that's his name, and I don't remember her name. Beatrice, that's her name. So we're following his girlfriend. Her name is Beatrice, and she goes and meets up with this friend group that she used to have, and they haven't really talked since 𝐜𝐿 died. And Beatrice goes because, again, like, she doesn't actually know what happened to 𝐜𝐿, and so she is kind of trying to find out what the others know, because she always got the sense that, like, they knew more than they actually let on. And, like, somewhere along the way, throughout the night, they get into a car accident, and so they are sent to this kind of limbo place between life and death called the Neverworld 𝐜𝐭. So basically, they're stuck there, and this is a kind of a Groundhog Day type situation where the day of their deaths is constantly repeating, and this will only stop happening once they get together and take the vote. And so essentially the idea is that only one of them can survive, and they need to vote on that, and they need to all be in agreement. Only one of them can disagree, but like the rest of the group needs to agree on who is going to survive. And they know this because there's like this dude in this world that like explains things to them. Like, I don't remember what he was called. So basically that's the idea, and the story is following them as they kind of are internalizing what's happening to them and trying to figure that out, and also trying to figure out what actually happened to 𝐜𝐿 the night he died. Now, I think the concept sounds really, really interesting. I just did not like the execution at all. And the reason why I did not enjoy the execution of this story was because this story is divided in 3 parts, and like the second half of the first part, I struggled so much because So basically, they are in this situation and they try 2 different things, which are like the most obvious things that you can think of to get out of this situation. It does not work, and they give up right away. They try 2 things and they give up. And I just don't think that realistically human beings would react that way. I feel like if we were in this situation, like, we aren't expecting this paranormal stuff to happen. And so if it did happen, you would be in denial for a long time and trying to get out of it. But they just gave up. And the thing is, it doesn't even make sense, because I understand that this is kind of a Groundhog Day type situation, but it isn't really, because in Groundhog Day, the guy has no idea what's happening to him. There's no one there talking to him and explaining to him like what's happening, for how long it's going to go on, and if there's any way for him to get out of it. So it would make sense that he would despair. But in the book, they have this entire world to explore, and they have this guy giving them the rules of this world, and instead of trying to glean information from him, they just give up. And, yeah, I don't think it's realistic. I think that the author was trying to explore that part of human nature, but it was forced. I don't think it belongs in this story. And if the author wanted to explore that, I think the plot should have been changed. I also hated the characters. There wasn't a single character I liked in this book. I think they were all just terrible people. Like, they were all deceitful at best and terrible at worst. The fact that they used to be friends, and yet their first reaction isn't to be horrified at the idea of like condemning the others to death. No, they just want to save themselves right off the bat. Like, they don't want to help the others whatsoever. It's so weird to me. I get that you don't talk anymore, but still, like, I would think that even if they were strangers, you wouldn't necessarily be okay with the idea of condemning people to death right away. I would want to believe that I would be horrified by that. I don't know. They were just terrible. The writing wasn't good either. I just didn't like basically anything about it. The plot itself, like the mystery and stuff, that was fine. It was serviceable, but it wasn't really good at any point. And honestly, I don't recommend it, and I was so disappointed because the plot sounded so interesting to me, and I've had this book on my TBR for so long. So like, I'm glad I read it, but I do not recommend it. Actually, I would say if you think that the premise of this book sounds good, I would say for you to play 𝐜𝐸𝐴. 𝐜𝐸𝐴 is a visual novel game. I played it on my laptop, but you may be able to play it somewhere else. I don't know. But like, it's a visual novel game. It's like super short. I think I played it in like 4 hours. And the premise is so incredibly similar. Like, it's actually crazy to me. The game came first though. So basically in this game, you have a group of really young characters. They're like high school seniors, and some of them are like in college. So the age range is the same, and they get together and they go to this island to spend some time because they used to go there on vacation. Like, the main character used to go there on vacation with her family. And like, Neverworld Wake is also set in a seaside town, so it's very similar. So in 𝐜𝐸𝐴, these kids go to this island to spend some time together, but the thing is that the main character's brother passed away, and there's some mysteries still about that night, and also there are grudges between the characters because of that, some hurt feelings, some unresolved issues, and so the dynamic is quite similar. The difference being that these characters in 𝐜𝐸𝐴 aren't necessarily bad people, they just have like, they're not doing well with the people, with the rest of the group, but they go to this island to try and kind of have a good time still, but they get there, and not only are the dynamics between the characters complicated, but also weird things start happening in the island, and you need to figure out the mystery of the island. You need to figure out what happened to the main character's brother, and your decisions change the ending. So your decisions change what happens within the island, and they also change the outcome of the different relationships between the characters. So the plot is like very, very similar, but 𝐜𝐸𝐴 is so much better. Like, I don't think that 𝐜𝐸𝐴 is amazing, although I know that there are people who absolutely love it. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's really worth it because it's super fun and it's super quick. So yeah, I would say if you think that the plot for Neverworld Wake is interesting, don't read the book. Play 𝐜𝐸𝐴. Alright, moving on from that, next I read Wildcat by JP Harker. This is an adult self-pub fantasy novel, and so basically in this story we're following our main character 𝐜𝐸𝐴. She is this really feisty young woman, and she wants to become a warrior, but in her culture, women usually stop being warriors after they become mothers, and she's in love with this guy, and she's gonna get married, and she wants to become a mother as well, so she's kind of dealing with that dilemma. And in the beginning of the story, you're getting introduced to her family, her friends, and her culture in general. And then a bit later, you have this other civilization that attacks them and tries to conquer them. So this is essentially the Roman conquest of Britain, but make it fantasy. And it's a good book. It's just not for me. I was hoping to love it, and unfortunately I did not. But I think it's because the book wasn't written for me. And what I mean by that is that this book focuses a lot on world building and fight scenes, which are like two of my least favorite things about fantasy books. Now, don't get me wrong, I like both, but in moderation. So I think that this book focused a lot on world building, and it did it really, really well. And I understand why that was, because this author is trying to contrast the two cultures, because a lot of this is 𝐜𝐴 learning about this new culture and adapting to it. So I thought that was really well done. It's just that it was too much for me. We go into too much detail, and I don't need that much. I don't want that much. And then we also have like 3 big battles in this book that span a lot of pages. It's not my thing either, although I will say, like, side note, 𝐜𝐴 fights with a sword and an axe, and I thought that was so cool. I love that. Anyway, I like it when we see characters that don't just fight with a sword. Like, swords are so basic. Anyway, like, they're cool, but they get used so many times that it becomes kind of old. Anyway, the battle sequences were really well done. Like, you get all the details that go into preparing the battle and training for the battles and the military side of it. And then you see the battles, and they're very simple to follow and to visualize. I thought that the author did a really good job at that. It's just, I don't need big battles. Like, I get bored if I have pages and pages of battle sequences. And then the plot was good, but it was very simple. And so it had very few story beats. And so I thought that this book ended up being very slow because of that. And here's the thing. Usually I would be okay with slow books, and I like slow books, but it's when we have a slow book because we're focusing on character, which wasn't what happened here. This was slow because we're focusing on fight scenes and on like the cultures and the contrast between the cultures. World building. The characters, I think, lacked so much in this book. That was the thing that was lacking in here. And I'm a character-driven reader, so that's not ideal for me. So we get introduced to a ton of characters, like a lot of them. And none of them have depth because there are so many. Like, you get introduced to Rhea's friends, Rhea's family. You get introduced to the warriors from her people. You get introduced to her enemies. You get introduced to the villains. You get introduced to Rhea's husband's family. So it's a lot of characters, a lot of names, and I don't have a problem with memorizing names. That wasn't my issue. The issue is, if you're going to give me so many names, I need you to put the work into the characters, and that's not what happened. Like, there were so many characters that were mentioned that were just kind of like, oh, this is Rhea's brother, this is Rhea's sister, that's what the character is. Like, I don't know anything about these people, and I thought that was really unfortunate. And then also, like, Rhea herself, I didn't love her because I loved her in the beginning. Like, she's super feisty, and she's both, like, compassionate and strong physically. And I think that a lot of times, and especially nowadays, we see characters that are supposed to be strong female characters, but they're just like, they know how to fight. That's all they are. But that's not the only strength there is. And Rhea had both. And I love that so much. It was such a breath of fresh air. But the thing was, the author did something that is a very big pet peeve of mine, which was a time jump. Usually I hate them, and I hate them because usually they're not necessary in my opinion, but then also they are very hard to pull off. And I don't think that the author pulled it off here because Rhea, something happens to her. It's very traumatic. It's very bad. And she's not doing well after that. And the author shows us that, but then introduces a time jump. And then it's years later, and Rhea is mostly doing okay. So you don't get to see any of the progression when it came to her trauma. And I don't think that was a good choice. I don't think that this book needed the time jump. And unfortunately, that decision ruined her character arc for me. But I did really like her in the beginning, and I like her husband. He's a really cool character. He's very, like, he's a leader, and he's very compelling, I thought. He's also one of the characters that gets a little bit more depth. So yeah, overall, I just think that this book is a good book. It's just not for me. But I think that if you enjoy good fight scenes and good world building above anything else, I think you probably will enjoy this. Okay, then I read both My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey and The Samurai Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I'm not gonna go too in depth with these two because I did a reading vlog about them. If you are interested, go check it out. I'm gonna link it in the cards. But essentially, My Killer Vacation is like a summary romance book. You're following Taylor and Miles. Taylor goes on vacation, and when she gets there, she finds a dead body inside the house she rented, and Miles is a bounty hunter and he's trying to solve the murder case. This is like age gap, insta-love, insta-lust, grumpy sunshine. Those are the tropes, I would say. It was fun. It was really funny. I think that if you go into this not taking it seriously, because this book is not taking itself seriously, it's super quick, super fun. If you go into this not taking it seriously, knowing that this book is really, really steamy and wanting to just like have a good time, and if you just want a quick summary romance, I do recommend it. I had a great time. I laughed out loud so many times. I had some issues because of the insta-love, but that was mostly it. I really, really enjoyed the characters, both side characters and the main characters especially. I thought they had very good chemistry. But again, like, this is insta-lust, insta-love, very steamy, so be aware of that. But if you are aware of that, if you don't mind that, and you go into this just wanting to have a good time, you probably will. Then I read The Samurai Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. Most people know what this is about because a show just came out, so anyway, this is a YA romance book. It follows our main character, Belly, and basically summer is her favorite time of the year because she goes to the beach house of her mom's best friend, and so she goes with her mom, her brother, and then there's her mom's best friend, obviously, and her two sons, Jeremiah and Conrad. And this book, you have like flashback chapters, but also chapters in the present where you're following like the current summer, and you're also following in the flashbacks some situations that happened in summers past. And in this summer particularly, Belly is looking different because she grew a lot this past summer, and she also sees herself differently, carries herself differently, and Jeremiah and Conrad start looking at her differently. You have a love square, but Belly has been in love with Conrad ever since she was very little. So that is the concept. This is very character driven. There's not a lot of plot. You just kind of hop between scenes, but it's very, very quick to read, very short chapters. It's summery, it's refreshing, it's fun. It reads very young, I will say. But again, I think that like if you like these types of books, if you like YA contemporaries, you probably will have a good time with this because it is well written. And I do think that while I have some issues with the characters, I do think that Belly portrays what it's like to be a teenager very, very well. I think that Jenny Han captured that really, really well. So again, like it's not necessarily my thing, but I still had a good time. So I think that if you like YA contemporaries, you probably will have an even better time than I did. Okay, and then the last book that I read was a reread, and it was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, and I'm just kind of trying to reread all of these 3 books so that then I can read Era 2 and be there once the last book in Era 2 comes out. So I think that this is popular enough that a lot of people know what this is about. But basically the pitch for this book is, what if the Dark Lord won? So this is set in a very bleak world. The sun is red, ash falls from the sky, and you're following 2 main perspectives, 𝐜𝐭𝐲 and Vin, and they're both Mistborn. And so what that means is that in this world, people who have magical abilities can ingest metals, and depending on the metal that you ingest, it gives you different abilities. And some people can only ingest one type of metal, and those people are called Mistings, and people that can ingest all types of metal are called Mistborn. And 𝐜𝐭𝐲 is now a Mistborn. He used to be a very famous thieving crew leader, and he wants to now overthrow the Lord Ruler, who is the big baddie. And so he's putting together this thieving crew who are like the best of the best at what they do, and he ends up kind of taking Vin in as well. Vin is a Mistborn like he is, but she is also a street urchin, and so she isn't aware of these powers. Like, she knows that she has something special, but she doesn't know what elemency is. She doesn't know what being a Mistborn or a Misting is. She doesn't know what she is, and she doesn't know how to use these powers properly. So you're kind of following her as well as she is learning all this with 𝐜𝐿. So you're learning this magic system alongside Vin, which is super fun. And so this is in a way a heist novel, but I would say that this is even mostly about the master-apprentice relationship that Vin and 𝐜𝐿 have, and it's very much a coming-of-age story for Vin. I had a great time rereading this book. First of all, I listened to the audiobook, which was so nice because this is narrated by Michael Kramer, and I love him. I think he does such a great job. And so that was lovely. And then I like these characters so much, and this world, despite the fact that it can be so terrible, it's so cozy to me because I don't know, I like the world. I think it's really interesting. I love the magic system and knowing all the details about it. And I also like these characters so much, like they feel like they're my friends. And so it was just a great reading experience. Honestly, I couldn't recommend this series enough. I think that the characters aren't necessarily the best part of this series, this trilogy. I think that Sanderson gets a lot better at his character work later on, especially with Stormlight. But I think that, if anything, he succeeds at creating very likable characters, and I do think that what he does here with Vin is amazing. She's such a complex character, and I love the journey she goes on, and I just love this crew and the found family element. This book just feels so cozy, and this is such a good first entry. Like, this isn't the most fast-paced book ever, but I think the pacing is pretty perfect. The beginning is pretty slow, but then it gets going, and I think the pacing is very steady. This is a good book at keeping you engaged. The magic system is interesting, the story is fun, the characters are fun. Honestly, I don't know, man. If you haven't picked this series up, what are you doing? Like, I really think you should. And it's a good entry into Brandon Sanderson if you are interested in that. Okay, and that's it. Those were all the books that I read in June. And now let's do my July TBR kind of rapid fire. Hi, so just a quick disclaimer. I filmed this video in the beginning of July. So that's why in the next portion of the video, I'm going to be talking about a July TBR. But the thing was, I filmed this and then I got so busy that I couldn't edit anything. So that's why I'm talking about a July TBR. I actually thought about deleting that portion of the video, but I figured these are still books that I am prioritizing and that I want to read in the near future. So I decided to just keep it in, but be aware of the fact that's why I'm talking about July. But think of this as a sort of July/August TBR. Back to the video. So here's the thing. In July, there's going to be this month-long readathon called the Questathon, and I will link the announcement video in the description. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to participate, but I really want to. So I'm going to tell you about the books that I'm planning on reading for the readathon, and also some books that are like on my priority list that I probably won't get to, but that I want to get to. So the Questathon is a readathon that is fantasy inspired, and it is like very much inspired by Lord of the Rings because you get to choose your characters, and so like you can be a hobbit or a wizard or an elf or a mortal. I don't know if there's any other option, but yeah, you get to choose your character, and you have like different prompt boards, and the idea is to complete 2 prompts out of every board. So you have so many different prompts that you can choose from, so you can basically do anything you want in this readathon, read anything you want, and you can double up. So you can either read 2 books per board, or you can read 1 per board. But I'm going to be reading 1 per board because I don't read that much. So let me show you the books that I chose. So the first board is the weapons board, and I'm going to be reading 𝐜𝐸 by Neil Shusterman for that. This is a reread for me, and I'm already like halfway through it. But the prompts that this covers is a reread for me, as well as a backlist book. But it could also be a book with a weapon on the cover because you have a 𝐜𝐸. So yeah, that's my first one. And I'm not going to say what this is about because we'll talk about it in July. Okay, then we have the light board, and I'm going to be reading Twice Shy by Sarah Hogle for that. And that will fulfill the prompts of being a book with a romance as well as a contemporary book. Then for the strategy board, I'm going to read Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. This is the sequel to 𝐜𝐸, and that's why I'm rereading 𝐜𝐸, because I read 𝐜𝐸 years and years ago. I never continued, and now I'm finally going to do it. And this fulfills the prompts: a book with sci-fi or fantasy elements. This is dystopian sci-fi, and also a book within a series. Then for the adventure board, I'm going to be reading The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. And this fulfills the prompts for a book with the word the, if, and, or of in the title, as well as a book with a pretty cover, because I love this cover. Then for the dark board, we have It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. And for this one, I will complete the prompt, a book with red on the cover, as well as probably the prompt of doing a fun activity, which can be anything that I want. This isn't a reading prompt. And then finally, we have the final battle board, which I love. And I'm going to be reading Ship of Magic by Robin Ha for this one. I'm going to be finishing it because I already started it. And for this one, I'm going to be completing the prompts: a book with a map. I love the map in this book. And then also a book with a conflict. So yeah, those are all the books that I'm planning on reading for Questathon, or will try to read for Questathon. And then I'm going to talk about the 3 books that I would like to prioritize as well, that I probably won't read, but I really, really want to read them. So soon, even if I don't read them in July. And those books are Fireborn by Rosaria Monda, then 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim, and then a new release called The Darkening. I'm so excited for all of these. And all of these are YA fantasy books, and I'm super, super excited about them. So that was it for this video. Those were all the books that I read in June, all the books that I'm planning on reading in July. And let me know in the comments if you read any of these and what you thought about them. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!